Hello, Internet, and thank you very much for tuning into the Cloud Native FM podcast. This is episode number 99, and I'm one step closer to doing a century in the next month. It's been a great journey so far, and always pleasure to speaking with guests who have wonderful vision around the topic they're actually working on. So today's topic around platform engineering. So before I'm actually introducing my guest into this conversation, who has a wonderful experience around platform engineering and other practices in the IT spectrum. So let me give you some context of what we're actually covering in this podcast today. So I think if you recently learning about platform engineering, you came across some of the article and they highlighted the quest for developer productivity in 24 will be continuing gaining momentum. Platform engineering triangle I used to see revolve around IDP, DevOps, and GenAI. And one of our CNCF platform working group, Abby, wrote an article. I link into the podcast today. You can read about it more on the term. So he phrases platform engineering as a team and technology that aims to abstract out the non-differentiating but not unimportant work in the software development life cycle. Recently, some articles mentioning 85% of the companies have either started implementing IDPs, meaning platform engineering, or planning to, according to the recent survey ran by the PO team. And quest for answering the key question for DevOps metrics continues. So, with that, we will be getting some sort of what the enterprise's challenges look like. Without any further delay, let me go straight to Richard, who is also the podcast of Cloud Therapist, for his
Yes.
views on platform engineering. Once again, thank you very much, Richard, on the podcast today. Without getting into the nitty gritty indicator of the topic, I want to my audience know more about you, where you are, what the work you have done, and what you actually been most spending a lot of time these days. So over to you, Richard.
Sure. Okay. Well, it's an absolute pleasure to be on. Appreciate you saying to inviting me on. So I'm Richard Simon. I'm a CTO at T Systems International. T Systems is part of Deutsche Telekom, which is the telco giant in Germany. So I've kind of been in the industry for about 34 years or so. So it's quite a long time. I've done all sorts of different types of roles in the past, everything from systems engineer to cloud architect to principal consultant and so on. Now, chief technology officer. The area that I work in is cloud transformation. So I kind of really focus on helping customers to migrate to cloud and really sort of work with them throughout their journey in cloud and as they kind of move their workloads into the cloud. I'm very much a sort of an opinionated person when it comes to open source and cloud native. I tend to try and do lots of speaking slots and things like that as well publicly. And I'm also on YouTube. So I have my own YouTube channel called Cloud Therapist. So if you want to check that out, go to YouTube and just type in Cloud Therapist, and you'll hopefully see me on there. And that's me. That's my intro.
Thanks, Richard. It's been a pleasure talking to you and finally on this YouTube channel. Being seeing you hosting some wonderful content on your YouTube channel, I highly recommend you to check that out, Cloud Therapist. There are some fun discussion around platform engineering and some wonderful topic he will cover on his YouTube channel. Here's a link available on the YouTube, and also I will include in the chat any of the comment descriptions. You can click and see what is the most recent work that Richard is actually doing. So I think you have spent wonderful time in the IT. 34 year is a lot, and it's
Mhm.
been more than my age. How much your time has spent on the IT spectrum? So I think it's a great question to ask you because you have been in the different roles in the different teams and the different companies. So let's start about this thing. What is the current state of platform engineering adoption you have seen in enterprises?
Well, I mean, I think platform engineering, either by definition or otherwise, has been around for some time. At least, I'm not an expert sort of in the area, but certainly speaking to experts in the area, that's the impression that I'm getting. So whether you would call it platform engineering, or maybe you were doing it without knowing that you were doing platform engineering. It has been around for for some time. Um, so I presume that that there is kind of a large number of enterprises who are already kind of developing, and certainly the awareness that we've seen maybe the last sort of 2-3 years of specifically platform engineering, that's certainly the case, and those organizations I think are well underway in terms of doing that. And then the others I think are you know still kind of looking at it and trying to really sort of digest the precursor to that, which is obviously DevOps, and some of the other sort of areas that have come in more recently, like GitOps and site reliability engineering and so on, which are also kind of affecting all of that, essentially that space. So on the whole, I think the enterprises are really getting to grips with platform engineering to try and see whether it's something that they would need to implement within their organization. So it's
Absolutely agreed. But
go ahead.
sorry, I'm on. But I'm saying like it's totally what you're actually getting the points on. It's really getting momentum into the newest transition as well. So I think as you
Mm,
highlighted that DevOps has already been there, site reliability, engineering, some of the terms we're actually doing in the platform engineering is not relatively very new, but has been
mm.
existed. But now we're actually heading toward the new domain. So I think some folks might be interesting, like how you can actually leverage the existing knowledge of DevOps into the platform engineering spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the experience that people have had in that sort of DevOps space will certainly be useful. Now, I think it's a matter of looking at how you can really sort of do platform engineering, and whether initially platform engineering is something that you should be doing. I mean, if you're a small enterprise and you're kind of just doing a small number of or very little development work, and most of your kind of stuff is off the shelf or something, then it's not perhaps something that is kind of essential to what you're doing, and potentially kind of the developers that you have is a small team, and there isn't any overload that they're sort of experiencing in terms of their everyday sort of activities, and the majority of their work is still dedicated to actually doing development work. So if that's the case, I think you're probably that it's not essential, I think, in your sort of environment right now. But if you are development heavy, then it's certainly something that you need to look at. And the way that you would approach it, and certainly my advice to customers, is that you would need to really have it as part of your strategy. So strategy is never going to be 100% and you've got all the pieces in place. It's always iterating. You're always iterating on it. You're always improving it, and you're also having to add in elements as well, new modules, new pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, if you like, to kind of build the full picture. So if platform engineering has not been one of those things that you've considered, and now it seems like it has enough merit for the sort of things that you're doing, then it's certainly something that needs to be augmented into your into your class strategy.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that platform engineering is getting a lot of attention and is now really hard to ignore because of some good reason. Like it's promising that it's help business move faster, make
Mm,
tasks easier for developers, and ensure consistency across team. And that's what we're actually dealing with for a very long time without having a predefined domain. And now we're building up a domain and hoping the promise it gives should be delivered to the business to exactly accelerate their business adoption, because the business have some certainty hurdle when adapting to the DevOps mindset or in the software development mindset. It's required some sort of traditional or cultural changes that we've been dealing with. So hopefully platform
yeah.
become engineering become moving in that direction, that solving the problem and making easier for developers and plus business to accelerate further. So I think last year we did a panelist talk, I think in the platform engineering, some sort of I highlighted, really enjoyed the conversation. I link this talk into YouTube as well, so people can watch out as well. So I think it's a very good time you ask you this question. So can you highlight some common challenges enterprises face in embracing platform engineering practices?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a, a number of the sort of issues that we've had kind of in DevOps are would probably sort of carry over really into platform engineering, and the most sort of you know common issues seem to be around um, the how tools are being used. DevOps is kind of maybe overrunning some of those kind of standards, or there's a lack of standards. Um, and again, I mean, I heard somebody was saying actually in a future talk that I'm releasing on my channel, one of my guests said developers don't actually want to build platforms. So that was quite interesting because you know for the last few years, we've kind of spent a lot of time trying to say, we need to kind of have dev and ops together. And now we're kind of maybe looking at separating the two again. So, the challenges would be around sort of how much of it, how much of the time of the developer is actually being used on actual development work and so on. I never really considered that as an issue, and again, that kind of makes me a little bit skeptical around sort of how much really do you need sort of kind of to be doing platform engineering, or to really kind of turn platform engineering into like a separate entity, something that you need to kind of put over there on the shelf and look at, or take down when when you need it. So those challenges are around sort of the overload. There's a lot to talk about sort of things like cognitive overload of developers, standardization. I think are issues as well. Um, and again, complexity of kind of some of the tools potentially, because you don't have a standard around the tooling. So developer one might be using particular tools, developer two might be using something else. And then when they exchange information or collab on something, it's quite difficult to do because they use different tooling, for example. And again, that could potentially cause things like delivery to kind of slow down. So that might cause issues with how much you can actually turn into production in terms of the code that you're developing. So in terms of issues, in terms of around scalability, complexity, standards, collaboration, and having maybe a sort of a singular framework, approachable framework, is I think is all the main challenges that I've seen.
Yes, absolutely. Those are actually really easier to understand because I think if you work in the, let's say, if the enterprises or companies or startup beginning their journey into the Kubernetes, they came across a very sophisticated landscape. There are
Mm,
some choices to bring in Ingress in Kubernetes, 10 of them. Some choices to bring in service mesh into the spectrum, and there are tons of
mm,
choices then for GitOps tooling, for observability and telemetry, all having some different personas, use cases, and different kind of contexts when actually you are
yeah.
adopting it. So having the cognitive load is bigger now. In
Mm,
order to deploy only a WordPress app in the Kubernetes cluster, you have to down the rabbit hole of understanding how the Ingress work,
mm,
how the two services communicate via APIs in Kubernetes. And there is so much stuff that you need to understand before deploying the application into the production setup. So these are the literally challenges that shifted toward enterprises when their developers actually start developing in the Kubernetes cluster, and that's journey going forward. And also, I
mm,
think we start out with the platform engineering adoption. We spoke about some challenges. We spoke about some DevOps shift. And remember, in the DevOps time, people like to call out that the DevOps need to have a cultural shift within the
yeah.
organization. Now we see a same debate. And what's your key takeaway on how crucial is a cultural shift with an organization for successful platform engineering adoption?
Yeah, I mean, to sort of answer that very simply, it's very, it's very crucial, absolutely crucial. The longer answer is, this is again what kind of makes me a little bit skeptical around platform engineering, because we seem to be asking the questions that we were asking 10 years ago around DevOps. So the that kind of makes me think, well, if we weren't doing DevOps properly before, and again, one of the quotes I've heard recently is that platform engineering is DevOps done right. And if that's the case, what have we been doing for the last 5 to 10 years with DevOps? So again, that kind of makes me a little bit skeptical around, how much focus there is sort of around platform engineering right now. Nevertheless, the things that we discussed before, the challenges and so on, are very much real. So organizations really, if they haven't done DevOps, and they're kind of starting that journey to cloud, so they're moving sort of from that data center monolithic, application approach and that sort of architecture, that client server architecture that we've had in the past, to a cloud native approach and so on in the cloud, then platform engineering definitely needs to be part of that movement, a part of that shift into the cloud. So not just culturally, because culturally it's the DevOps that really affects that sort of a social aspect of it, that cultural aspect of it, more than necessarily platform engineering touches on it. Platform engineering, I think, would probably come in as you have decided to do this now, as you have decided to do DevOps and things like that, and now you want to actually adopt that kind of approach. So how do you do that properly? Well, you do that properly by doing things like platform engineering and GitOps and so on. So platform engineering on the kind of the standardization side, on the framework side, and then things like GitOps on the infrastructure as code side of things.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think you made a wonderful point. Like, have seen the same debate in the DevOps world. Like, every time you started implementing a DevOps, you see an organization talking about, oh, there is some sort of cultural shift that needed to be taken care of while adopting a DevOps adoption. But see the same debate in the platform engineering as well. And then people figuring out how this thing is different than the DevOps.
Yeah.
That's somebody is taking and looking at the answer like it's the same set of problems. Like in a DevOps, I think in a dev and ops spectrum, we always use working with a different set of technologies. Devs working on some sort of front-end technologies, and in the deployment technologies they don't aware of. And then we see the environmental inconsistency that leading to some sort of productional issues. Then
Yeah.
now in the DevOps world, in the platform engineering world, there are a bunch of tooling that is different within the organization, within the different team. Some team prefer using Flux for GitOps, some Argo CD, some using different sort of ingress controller. Now we see a same set of problem arises when you have different choices in the implementation of some sort of problem that you're trying to solve. But now people saying, now, is it the same problem? It's required cultural shift, but it's getting in a newer form and a newer name. But what sort of advantages we can get if we're adopting a platform engineering mindset? That's where we see a lot of debate
Yeah.
happening all the time. So I think we now tend to move toward, because I mentioned tooling,
Hmm.
Argo CD, Flux, and different. So I think some folks might be here listening to us have question around what role do tools and technologies play in the successful implementation of platform engineering, or we can phrase like what tools to choose
Mm.
for platform for your platform that you're building for platform engineers.
Right. Well, as a very modern person, and like probably a lot of people online, I asked Microsoft Copilot that question, or similar question, and then the response I got from Copilot was that it said, "Well, it's all about containers and Kubernetes and GitOps and DevOps kind of practices." So not really any different from kind of what we've maybe if we just have done a search, we'd have probably found that. But I think the it is an important question, because there's a number of kind of essential things that you probably need to look at to make that process successful. So the only issue there, though, is we're again at the sort of early stage of trying to figure out what that kind of tool would look like. Do we need a separate tool? Do we just bring in that, the tooling that we've had in DevOps and infrastructure as code and automation, and just make use of those and just, put those together essentially? Or is there somebody actually who's done it as a third party, off the shelf tool that we can go and get? But actually, it's just the same old stuff that we've, been using in that sort of DevOps and automation space. Or, could we see maybe like a portal, an apps portal of some kind, where you actually go and make choices around the tools that you want, and then that actually gets encapsulated into one platform that gets installed for your environment, whether that's in the cloud or running it in a data center, whatever. It doesn't really matter. It should be able to address everything. So I don't think there's enough maturity really in that space. I think we're just rehashing what we've had before, and even Copilot seems to be agreeing, with that as well. But things like I've noticed recently, things like Red Hat Developer Hub, for example. So that's an interesting area that seems to be actually targeting platform engineering specifically. And the hub, that sort of app store kind of approach is really what I'm kind of expecting to see in this space, so that people can actually build their environment using that hub, using that portal, and then that portal will encapsulate all of those choices that you've made, and then go off and deploy it for you. So you're not having to kind of hand pick everything and build it one tool at a time. And then once you've done that, you've got the whole sort of environment that you want for platform engineering. And also, obviously, if you kind of provide options in that IDP, in that internal developer platform, how do you do that? Well, at the moment, you probably have to do that all manually yourself. I mean, you can obviously automate it, with automation tools, but essentially it's the same tools that we've had before. There's not a huge amount of difference. So you're just choosing, this type of runtime over that one, or this ingress control over that one, or whatever it is that or this Kubernetes platform over that other one, or something like that. And that would be kind of essentially what I think we have at the moment. But what I would like to see is things like the Red Hat Developer Hub. OpenShift might actually integrate some of that stuff. I've seen some solutions from Octopus, from Harness, and others that are kind of all in that space or heading in that space. But I think that area is still very immature at the moment.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, and I think that's where we see a lot of momentum going on. Like we talk about many tools to choose from, and all have some sort of steep learning curve, and plus they have some particular use cases they're trying to solve, because not one tool can solve all the problem of organization that actually they are facing. There are a plethora of tools. So I think, as you mentioned, IDP and developer experience is getting a lot of momentum. How do developer can easily scale a cluster, or shrink down the cluster, or actually create a cluster on the fly based on the problem they are solving for their customers, without looping in DevOps people for setting up their infrastructure and their
Yeah,
requirement. That's we
yeah,
see a lot of momentum going on.
yeah. And can I also just mention the distinction between actually building that IDP, and then the other side of it being, what do you do with that IDP? So there's the platform engineering kind of seems to be focusing on the build of that IDP. So you build the IDP, and then you give it to somebody to make use of. So they're an end user effectively, and they log in. They're sure they're a developer or something, but they're effectively an end user. They log into it, and then they start making use of it. And potentially that IDP takes care of things like reclamation of resources that you don't need anymore, or resources that haven't been used for over a month, or and things like that. So that, again, the developer's not having to worry about that. That's kind of automatically done for them potentially. But there is a distinction there between you using the IDP and somebody having built that IDP for you. So I think platform engineering is kind of around the how do we build that IDP, and that's what I was saying about that space not being mature enough at the moment.
Yes, absolutely. That's we're seeing currently happening all the time. Like we have different personas. We have some debates around what the IDP services, how much of the services can reside inside the box that we're
Yeah,
talking about in an IDP, and which services outside of that box, who will be using the box, what the shared responsibility inside the box, and how do we actually measure the practices and success rate of using that box, and how do we measure the success of who interacting with the box and
yeah,
solving the problem. That's still immature. A
yeah,
lot of debates, a lot of opinion. You can actually fight with those opinion or accept it. That is a lot of going on. But I
yeah.
think before we leave off, there are some one more few more question and we wrap up the discussion. I think
Sure.
that's very important because as we speaking, this is January 22, and there's still so many days in 2024. So where do you see the future of platform engineering enterprise heading, let's say in this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly going to be an interesting ride, I think, to look at it. So, is it actually sort of replacing the more traditional DevOps approach? I don't know. I think, like I said, the jury's out on that at the moment. I'm not necessarily convinced, that it is. And like I said, we need to see more maturity in a lot of these areas that we've discussed, and I'm sure others as well. And I'm sure your audience can think of a few more. The other, I think, issue that I just see kind of as a point of contention is, and I have posed this, a number of times. Although you're kind of doing it with the best of intentions, and you're kind of trying to, reduce that sort of cognitive overload or whatever for the developers, and effectively doing the developers a favor. Developers tend to be very kind of quirky creatures. They like their own development tools, they like their own libraries, they like their sources, they like their how they collaborate, and all that kind of stuff is very individual to that person. So when platform engineering comes in and says, no, it's now a framework, it's a standard, here's the tools, here's the options, yeah, the one that you really liked is not there but tough, that's how we do it at this company. That's going to be not necessarily something that's everybody's going to really like. But certainly, yeah. So that kind of question around whether it's sort of replacing DevOps or whatever, the jury's, I think, out on that. That remains to be seen. And again, it poses the question of is dev divorcing ops again? So are we separating the two again? Because we kind of just managed to get them together. Are we kind of are they kind of going to be separating again? So we'll see. But I suspect that we'll see that it'll be kind of a busy time trying to really kind of figure out platform engineering for a while. So we're going to sort of fumble through the dark for a while, trying to kind of figure out our way through that. As we said, the tools are not mature enough for that, so we'll see how those develop over the next 18 months to 2 years. And as I said, that I'd really like to see that sort of portal approach where you make the choices and then the IDP is created for you out of those choices that you made, and not having to really build it all from scratch ourselves, which I suspect is kind of the majority of how things are being done at the moment. So yeah, I mean, certainly, if you're not doing it, like I said, keep an eye on it. Uh, try and look for news and articles and blogs and things like that are talking about it, and see how it's actually progressing. But if you're going to be including it, or you're interested in doing it, or it seems to be hitting the right points for you, then you should certainly be looking at it as part of your strategy, overall class strategy.
Yes, absolutely. I think all these are wonderful consideration if you're actually heading toward the platform engineering adoption. So there's a no debate around that. So now, before I ask you to conclude what the key takeaway from this conversation, the final question, I think that's I've seen asking very well, so many times popping up in the debates is for organization just starting their platform engineering for organization just starting their platform engineering journey, what advice would you give?
Yeah, I mean, I probably can't speak too technically about it, but the advice there is, again, is you first of all, I think you need to step back and certainly have a strategy for cloud in terms of how you're actually doing cloud and your approach to cloud. So whether that's a cloud operating model or it's an overall IT sort of strategy and so on, you need to have that. And platform engineering is certainly going to be part of that. To what degree is up to you in terms of your organization. As I said earlier, in some areas where it might be useful, in other areas maybe it's not so essential right now. But either way, you need to certainly keep an eye on the progress of all of the things that we've mentioned, as well as others as well, because it will probably come back and sort of affect you at some point, and you need to kind of look at it. So certainly have it as part of your strategy. Look at articles and blogs and videos and things like that. And really, DevOps is still a good place to be, a good place to start if you haven't done that. If that's not part of your journey. If it is and you're experienced, then it's something that you need to be evaluating. Platform engineering, you need to be evaluating that. But again, look at it as part of how you do cloud evaluations, how you do your technology evaluations, whether that's a competency center, as some people call it, or a cloud center of excellence or whatever. It needs to be augmented into the part of that strategy.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And as Richard speak, I think we couldn't be agree on more on this. We have to, if you have already been in the DevOps space, I think it's a little bit of you actually already familiar with the language and the things you're actually speaking towards. And also we need to take in consideration of how you actually are you live in the cloud or you live in the outside of the cloud,
Yeah,
what existing knowledge your organization skill set have, what problem you are facing for your customers, are you working on the Kubernetes cluster daily? What cluster size those are in? Do you want
yeah,
to do a scaling, horizontal scaling, auto scaling? And how if are you able to do the drift reduction is your need? Are you going toward the service mesh spectrum? These are all things that revolves around platform engineering, and that's need a cloud evaluation. That's a great terminology to think about it.
mm,
So, Richard, before I let you off, it's been
sure.
pleasure talking to you. It's really
Likewise.
enjoyed the conversation and really learned a lot from your key takeaways. But what's your five takeaways on platform engineering?
Sure. Well, I think the first one is to really consider platform engineering as kind of part of the DevOps strategy that you have. And as I said, if you're already running that, then that should be definitely part of it. If it's not, then it's certainly an opportunity to actually integrate it from the start, and that's a great place to be. Second thing is platform engineering kind of needs to be managed and governed. So just like everything else that you have, like I said, needs to be part of that strategy. It's introducing frameworks and potentially new technologies to your environment. So you need to kind of engage your organization's, competency or cloud competency center or class center of excellence. Third one is that platform engineering best practices kind of dictate really that you should be considering, should be considered for maybe kind of medium and large enterprise. Like I said, again, if you're kind of developer heavy, then you need to be kind of essentially looking at that. But if you're a kind of a small, like a startup, as you mentioned earlier on, saying maybe it's not the essential thing to do right now. There are other, there's bigger fish to fry, so to speak, with that. The fourth one, I think, is involve everybody who's going to be affected. So your DevOps engineers, your developers, your architects, your SREs, and have really a kind of a collaborative approach to how you do platform engineering. So kind of get the thoughts and opinions of everybody into that cloud center of excellence, so that the IDP that comes out of all of that as a result, has taken into account as many of those opinions as possible, and has included the requirements, the functional requirements are there. And then kind of just avoid anything that's superfluous. Don't kind of just believe the hype or go and implement something that's not necessary. Make sure that it's something that is going to be, that IDP is going to be useful at the end of the day, because obviously you're spending a lot of time on it, and then it makes sense to for it to be used. The other thing is not to just kind of jump in and do that's the fifth one, and not to just jump in and do platform engineering. Remain skeptical, because actually that helps you. That's a healthy kind of view to have, because that helps you to actually get all the answers and satisfy yourself in terms of the answers that you get for doing platform engineering. So kind of step back, look at the overall picture, make your sort of platform engineering decisions based on your requirements and priorities.
Absolutely. These are wonderful kind of takeaways on platform engineering. You should consider it. Thank you very much, Richard. It's pleasure talking to you. And I also highly recommend, if you like the conversation Richard has, Richard also run his YouTube channel called Cloud Therapist. There are some wonderful content available with wonderful celebrities from tech world will be inviting for his channel and doing a wonderful thorough investigation on some of the tooling and some of the spectrum on the platform engineering domain and some other domains. So go check that out. That is your task number one for today. And if you're actually looking forward to debates on what the state of platform engineering adoption, what are some of the challenges, is a culture shift is crucial, what are the common hurdle we see enterprises facing, what roles do technologies, tools and technologies play, and some of the next few things, and some production and platform engineering. This podcast, we covered all of these details. And Richard, five key takeaways are the cornerstone of this whole discussion. So I believe the focus on the providing an exceptional developer experience continues to intensify. The platform are not just about infrastructure, they're about to empowering developers. And I expect in 2024 we expect to see a surge of tools for idps and practices geared toward enhancing developer experience. And as we navigate the complex landscape of platform engineering in 2024, agility will be the key. The ability to adopt new technologies, embrace evolving practices, and foster a culture of continuous learning will set the stage for success. And thank you very much, everyone, for being tuning into this podcast. This is episode number 99. When I started the channel, I think I haven't speak with some legendary guest on my show, but thanks to all who are always very easily approachable for me and for our audience to know about their his vision in the tech trend terminologies. So thank you very much. Next one is 100th episode, and we will be speaking with Daniel Bryant on developer relations and developer advocacy at hard places in February the 1st. Make sure to tune in and have a wonderful day, everyone. Stay safe, stay happy. We will be meeting again soon. Bye bye.